Oh, budget day in the court of public opinion. You know, I don't even know why they have the elaborate kind of lock-up that they do. They take all the journalists into a room and they lock them up and give them a copy of the budget. It's all surrounded with all this mumbo-jumbo, when really the government of the day, and left and right both do it, they leak all this stuff well in advance. But we'll get to all of that in a minute. It's, let me see, May the 9th. May the 9th. Oh, well, that's auspicious or interesting, isn't it? May 9, 1901. 1901. The year that they wrote the Constitution, which, by the way, was written down here in Adelaide in Cheshire Street, where Cheshire Cellars was for a long time, up on the second floor. When Primo Kayon had that restaurant, he would have dinner parties up there. Great restaurateur. Primo, if you're ever around, God, we miss you. That was a lovely old restaurant, old world, old school kind of thing. Anyway, that table seated 12, and around that table they wrote the Constitution here in Adelaide. Don't know if that's widely known, but anyway, that was 1901. But 1901, the first Australian Parliament opens in Melbourne, though the first working session will not take place until the 21st of May 1927. A few years down the track, Canberra replaces Melbourne as the capital of Australia, and the Australian Parliament convenes there for the first time. 1988, on the same day, Australia's new permanent Parliament House is opened by Queen Elizabeth in Canberra, May 9, 1988. That, I think, probably, I remember the budget, it was something like $1 billion. Bob Hawke was the driving force behind that, and well worth it. I mean, it's an amazing building. Doesn't actually look like a Parliament House to me, but anyway, I hope it's functional. 1914, US President Woodrow Wilson proclaims Mother's Day. Mother's Day, first ever. New Australian $50 banknote is released 2019, just the other day, and believe it or not, a product of our wonderful education system, they printed 46 million $50 banknotes, and they spelt responsibility incorrectly. I don't know if, because there are so many of them, it probably isn't all that valuable, but it's for a collector, I guess you'd try to get one of those. They spelt responsibility, R-E-S-P-O-N-S-I-B-I-L-I-T-Y. They spelt it R-E-S-P-O-N-S-I-B-I-L-I-T-Y. Whoops! Well, what could you do with 46 million $50 notes? Well, look, I wouldn't mind if that's a few spelling mistakes. God, that's all right. Why be picky, for God's sake? The Beatles signed their first contract with EMI. That was Parlophone in 1962. British intelligence at Bletchley Park breaks the German spy code captured when they got hold of that Enigma machine, a code machine that the Germans had. And the British got it from a weather ship. They found it on a weather ship. I would have fancied it would have been a submarine in the North Atlantic or something, but no. 1941. Howard Carter, the British archaeologist and Egyptologist who found King Tutankhamun's tomb, was born in London. He died in 1939, and he was born in 1873. And all those curses that he probably theoretically evoked upon himself didn't seem to do him any harm. the first Fokker F-28 Friendship took to the air on this day in 1967. The Fokker Friendship. That was a sort of mainstay of air transport in Australia for ages. Tenzing Norgay, the Tibetan climber, 1986. He was the first man to reach the summit of Mount Everest in 1953 with Sir Edmund Hillary, or Edmund Hillary as he was then. He dies of a cerebral hemorrhage at the age of 71 on this day in 86. Britain's first laundrette opens in Queensway, London in 1949. Wow, they were ahead of their time. A laundrette. Adam Opel, the German automobile manufacturer, born 1837. Little Richard, the American singer-songwriter and rock and roll pioneer. Tutti Frutti. I still don't understand how they got away with Tutti Frutti, I want a Rudy. But maybe in America it means something completely different. Anyway, he dies at 87, Little Richard. 2020 was the year. I was talking to you about Andy Warhol the other day, who's got an exhibition which is currently on here in Adelaide at the Art Gallery. Andy Warhol, his portrait of Marilyn Monroe sells for $197 million at auction in New York. The highest price ever paid for an American artwork. Well, like I said to you the other day, I don't get it. 2022 is the year. The Treaty of Windsor between Portugal and England is ratified at Windsor, cementing and strengthening the ties between the two kingdoms. It is the oldest diplomatic alliance which is still in force. It was signed on this day in 1386. 1386. The treaty guarantees the mutual security of both nations and strengthens commercial ties. And it still works. Good. Vidal Sassoon, the British-American hairstylist and CEO of Vidal Sassoon, dies of leukemia at 2012. And happy birthday to Billy Joel, born 1949. And if you remember the day for any reason at all, I hope you're going to have a lovely day. A lovely day of celebration. Well, let's talk about the budget. Now, the budget. The experts are saying, and I never know whether to listen to the experts or not, there'll be a surplus. But a small surplus. No, there won't. No. There'll be a small deficit and a tiny surplus, or maybe, and a structural deficit. I mean, really, they're covering all their bets. We'll see later on tonight. But again, it's our commodities: coal, iron ore, and gas, and of course a booming employment market, which has pulled in the cash. I hope someone, other than us, will note with gratitude the contribution made by the miners of this nation. And please, in Canberra, not that we can do very much in the court of public opinion from my garage here at Glen Osmond, can't do much, but I really hope they remember that any attempt to increase the taxes that these miners pay is an attack on the goose that's laying the golden egg. And that goose, of course, doesn't have to stay around. Nope. Can fly off any day of the week. And just on the budget, you can just bet that any problems, the Treasurer's narrative will be that if there's a problem, he's going to blame it on the previous government. Politics 101, I guess. They all do that. But they've got to stop soon. You know, you can't keep on going back to the previous people to blame them for everything. But isn't it strange that they pledge some relief for the high cost of living? The high cost of living that the government largely caused in the first place. Driven, I would argue, mostly by electricity charges. and the pursuit of these renewables. The great evil, the great enemy of any country is inflation. It always has been and always will be, and I fear greater under a Labor government. The budget can and will offer all sorts of band-aids and financial relief and things, but they must go to the root of the cause, the ongoing cause of the pain. Don't just treat the symptoms. At least, if they do nothing, at least do nothing to further fuel inflation. This is the great test of government. As I say often, their motto should be, do no harm. Although I rather like I think they're the Liberal Democrats, and their election slogan is elect us and we'll leave you alone. I like that. I do. But needless to say, they didn't get elected too much. The World Health Organization, the WHO, says that COVID is no longer an emergency. Then what is it? It's pretty hard to be relaxed and comfortable with something that has killed 5 million people in recent times, and which is still out there. But anyway, it's no longer an emergency. They'll probably concentrate their emergency on climate. Oh yes, I can see it coming. Changes to the single mother's benefits. Now it's now going to cover mothers with children up to 14. And I don't know, I have seen the figure that will add to the bottom line. But for years there has been a thing called legal obligation. Now this was brought in by John Howard. An understanding that recipients of the pension, of whom I might tell you there are hundreds and hundreds of thousands, had a mutual obligation. The obligation or understanding was that they would get the benefit, but they would also have to look for a job. The government called it mutual obligation. It went two ways. Under that ruling, however, well over 100,000 women, mothers, had their benefits suspended because they didn't live up to the mutual obligation. You know, agree to it in the beginning, and I know we need the money, okay. People get desperate, but the point is, an agreement is an agreement. Well, the government is going to scrap that mutual obligation. I don't know why. I really don't. If somebody hands you money, it's pretty reasonable that there are some strings attached, and particularly as the strings are in the interest of the recipient. Welfare is not a lifestyle, particularly for a young family. A government is marked, I believe, by the number of people that it gets off welfare, not onto welfare. Of course, the likes of Kate Ellis wouldn't agree with that at all, I don't think. She is the wife of David Pemberthy, the fellow who does the breakfast program on the station I used to work for before they sacked me, 5AA. No surprise, she's a former Labour minister. She tweeted this piece on Saturday night. Coronation night. I would say insulting of, critical of the monarchy, the coronation, the whole ritual, ridiculing it. I despair. If you talk to these people, they would have total respect for the 60,000 years that the Aboriginals spent in Australia, doing nothing. Well, I would think, in my simple way of understanding these things, jumping up and down in the dust, building nothing, no towns, no cities, no significant buildings, inventing nothing, creating nothing. Oh, well, there was the boomerang, that's true, and there was the woomera. and they did have the fire stick, so they did invent fire. Yet these people will disparage a culture and a people who go back more than 1,000 years, achieved some of the most amazing things one could imagine. Yes, they made mistakes. I'm sure they made lots of mistakes. But the British Empire was something to behold. Why would somebody like Kate Ellis just hold the British culture in the same respect that she would hold, I believe, I imagine, the Aboriginal culture? It's beyond me. If I said about Aboriginal culture the sort of things the lefties say about the royals and the monarchy, I would be hounded from one end of this country to the other. Inclusion, inclusion, I can hear it. Inclusion, it's a wonderful thing. Inclusion is wonderful. Everything included except for the people who disagree with them. They obviously don't like a good debate, do they? If we allow this woke nonsense to continue, you know, we stand the possibility of losing this country. And looking at the coverage of the coronation, I didn't think I'd be so fascinated. Endlessly diverse, lots of different cultures, colours, people, flags. I noticed there wasn't an Aboriginal flag, which is appropriate because for 60,000 years there wasn't an Aboriginal flag. And I think, again, my opinion, it represents nothing more than division and racism. No country should have a government that produces 2 or really 3 flags, if you want to count the Torres Strait Islander flag. 3 flags for one nation? That's plain stupid. But I digress. Thumbs down to the ABC. I don't know if you saw it. Again, I suppose they are being true to their culture, their prejudice. But no criticism, really. Apart from their coverage of the coronation, because they were doing really topping and tailing of the BBC feed, the whole thing that they contributed was done through the prism of cynicism and sarcasm. The tone, the people. Stan Grant, the community, the attitude. I'm talking about the commentary surrounding the whole coverage. Maybe I'm super sensitive, but what I saw was disgraceful. The ABC should have been as respectful as the BBC, whose feed they took, as I said. These guys at the ABC have an agenda. It's as simple as that. And here's my puppy arriving. She doesn't have an agenda or anything more than throw my ball and get my dinner. It's true. But they do have an agenda. Everyone at the ABC, this is just me, mind you, from Ita Buttrose down, should be sacked. It's out of control. You've got to get rid of this sickness, this culture. It's nasty, it's woke, it's politically correct rubbish. It involves everything. Not just the commentary, but the people they hire from the top to the bottom. You've got to go to the root and take it out and start again with good people. Based on the sort of culture that Sir Charles Moses set up for many years, and Sir Talbot Duck-Manton who followed him. Simply the best people in the country doing the best work in the country, not some coterie of left-wing Labour layabouts, Greens and apparatchiks with an agenda. The ABC should be simply a meritocracy. Accurate, true, impartial and reliable. Thank you very much for viewing the Court of Public Opinion, ladies and gentlemen. Sometimes I get carried away, and you'll have to forgive me, or I hope not turn me off. We're on Facebook, and we've of course got the podcast on various platforms around the place. So one way or the other, 5 days a week, I hope you stay with the show, enjoy the show, comment on the show, and again, believe in yourself, and we'll see you tomorrow. I'm Jeremy Cordo. Pete and I will be back.